In our last video, Pashupati's people, we met the early settlers of the Indus Valley, forest loving folks who tamed rivers and worshipped nature through quiet rituals and deep respect. But as their descendants moved to the Gangetic plain and became the Arya, their way of worship transformed. Now that we are somewhat familiar with the history of Vedas, it's time to ask, what did the Arya actually do with them? Okay, let's imagine this. You are in ancient India. The air is smoky with fragrant herbs. The square fire pit crackles at the center. Around it, men chant in perfect unison, syllables older than Sanskrit, carried down like precious heirlooms. What you're witnessing is Yagna, a sacred fire ritual. Yes, but also something more primal, a transaction, a celebration, even a performance. To the Arya, gods were not distant or vague. They were the guests. Guests you fed with devotion and offerings of grains, ghee, and even words. The mantras were like RSVP cards. Each chant had to be picture perfect, or Agni, the fire god who delivered your invitation, might just burn the message, or worse, deliver it to the wrong god. Imagine cooking all day for guests and then mispronunciation happens of their names. Oops, there goes Indra's potion into the lap of Vayu. Now let's talk about why did they do this? So why go through all this trouble and perform a yagna? Was it just to keep the gods happy? Well, not exactly. The Arya believed that the gods, namely sunlight, rain, winds, river, they constantly nourished the world. So through yagna, they offered food and devotion to the gods, keeping the cosmic give and take in balance. What you give, the universe gives back. It wasn't just personal gain. Rich patrons, like kings and other rich people, they performed yagna for lok kalyan, which means welfare of all people. It was their way of scoring karmic brownie points as well, because they wanted to be good or kept good even after their death. So, who did what? Here's what it gets beautifully complex. A yagna was not a one man show. You needed a team, like a modern film crew. Each Veda had its special priest or the specialist in that Veda. First, the Rig Veda priest, the Hotri, chanted the mantra. Think of him as the scriptwriter and the narrator. The second Veda or the Yajur Veda, its priest, also called the Advaryu, actually performed the ritual, arranging the bricks, pouring ghee, coordinating the whole process. The Samveda's priest, or the Udgatri, turned those mantras into melodies. You can also think of him as a musician, the soul of the ritual, who actually chanted. And the fourth Veda, what about that? It came later. It was full of spells and healing hymns. The Vedic wildcard, they say. Each Veda had a job, so each priest had a role. Together, they created a multi sensory performance meant to reach the heavens. So, when you look at the Vedas, it had four layers. And this part blows my mind. The Vedas are not just books, they are layered like consciousness itself. So, let's peel back the four layers one by one. First, the Samhita. At the base is the Samhita. This is the pure mantra layer, which is a collection of hymns praising the gods, asking for blessings, or describing rituals. These verses were memorized for centuries. They were not written, they were memorized and passed down orally, syllable by syllable. Every pause, every tone mattered. It was like learning a sacred song where even the breath counted. The second layer of Vedas was called the Brahmana. It was above Samhita, the priestly instruction manual. So, if Samhitas are like the lyrics of a song, the Brahmanas are like the liner notes. Why do we chant this? When? How many times? What offerings go with it? So, these texts explain the logic behind the ritual. Sometimes with beautiful metaphors, other times with quirky stories. Ever heard of a tale of how the gods lost immortality to demons and won it back through a sneaky ritual? Well, that's a Brahmana classic. The third layer is called the Aranyaka. Now, this is where things get reflective. The Aranyaka, or the third layer of Vedas, it was also called forest books. They were written by the sages who left society and meditated in the woods. They still talk about the ritual, but with a twist. So things like, what if fire represents the sun? What if pouring milk into the fire is really feeding the universe? So they were thinking. These texts move from the outer action to the inner symbolism. The beginning of a shift from doing to understanding, making sense of it. The fourth section was called the Upanishads. So finally, we reach the crown jewel, the Upanishads. These are not about the rituals at all. They ask haunting, timeless questions like, who am I? What is real? If the body dies, what continues? So these are the dialogues between gurus and students, often under moonlit trees or near dying fires. One Upanishad calls the self, the Atma, smaller than the grain of a rice, but greater than the sky. Another says, you are that, not separate from God, but made of the same essence. And suddenly, we are no longer offering things into fire. We are offering ourselves into the search of truth. That was the last layer of Vedas called Upanishads. Together, these layers give us two paths. First, the Karma Kanda, also the path of action. Then, the Jnana Kanda, the path of wisdom, insight, and awakening. And the Veda says, you need both of them. A person who acts without wisdom is like a lamp without oil. A person who meditates but never serves is like a cloud that never rains. When Krishna tells Arjun to fight, not out of anger but with awareness, that's the Vedic fusion. Do the ritual but also understand it. Understand the meaning behind it. Live your life but also never stop questioning it. Well, thank you for joining me on this journey through the Yagna and the Vedic layers. If you enjoyed this video and it sparked a thought, hit like, subscribe, and share the light. Let's continue learning. See you in the next video.